we're all talking about what the return haul is going to be for the catcher. What about if the catcher trade is one of the catchers plus a Ryu or a Kikuchi? So it's actually a salary dump. You'd still get back a nice piece, like you still get back like a nice bullpen piece or something like that. But now you've got the savings are already in tow. Now you've got all these savings. Now we really are, hey, get Carlos Correa on line 1, get Aaron Judge on line 2, get DeGrom on line 3. What's Justin Verlander's schedule look like today? Like, we're talking the biggest game hunting that the Toronto Blue Jays have ever done in their franchise's history. I could see something like that happening.
I love that take, and that's a really interesting one, and you kind of brought it up. I haven't heard that either. No. So I love that you're thinking that way. And it's interesting because last night on Long Toss, I know Garth brought up that the Blue Jays, yes, they've gone big game hunting. Yes, they've spent some major money, but they have never done the proverbial mega deal.
Yeah.
Do you think this front office has it in them to do it? Because they've yet to prove that they can, but that doesn't mean they won't, right?
Yeah, 1,000%. I think they do. I think if anything, there's the ghosts of the JP Ricciardi era, maybe informing some of these decisions. Do you remember JP Ricciardi for his first couple of years? They finished in last place, dead last, the Blue Jays, and he told Rogers ownership, he said, "Man, look at the payrolls. The Toronto Blue Jays cannot compete with these payrolls." And finally, one year, Rogers said, "For your next 3 years of the budget, we're increasing it by $100 million." So increase this year's by 33.3, spend it all now, do whatever you're going to do. He spent it all now. They brought in AJ Burnett, they brought in BJ Ryan.
Yep.
And they went from 5th place to 4th place, right back to last place in that 3-year span. Didn't mean a thing. So there's Rogers saying, for the money that we were spending that was unacceptable, the results were still the same, 4th and 5th place. So why would we inject another, huge amount of money into something like this? And it's the same ownership group who I really think have a lot more faith in Shapiro and Atkins. So yes. I do think that they will open up that vault when the time has come, but it can't just be the pitch, the presentation from Shapiro and Atkins cannot be X amount of money, a huge contract for this player. And guys, this might be good for us. No. It has to be this championship. Here's how this player wins us the championship. Here's how this player means that you need to start getting your Rogers Blue Jays championship merchandise ready to go. It has to be that level of a slam dunk. But remember, guys, we talked before, the Shapiro and Atkins, they built that sustainable playoff contender in Cleveland. And right as that playoff window opened, that's when they came over to Toronto. So there's no way that Rogers could have called up Shapiro at the time and said, "Hey, Mark, all that heavy lifting, those years of losing, years of night, no sleep in Cleveland. Now the fruits of that labor, that window's finally opening up. How'd you like to abandon that window, come over to Canada and do all that fruits of labor again, do all that heavy lifting again?" No. They must have been clear that, honestly, Mark, when you come over here, there is heavy lifting to do. You do have to rebuild our organization. They felt like Anthopoulos ravaged the organization, but Mark Shapiro, you will be thrilled. Once you've done the heavy lifting, once you've opened that window, you will be thrilled at the money we have for you. Cleveland doesn't have that money for you. You will be thrilled at what we have for you. So I really think that Rogers would commit to something like that.
Let's talk catching for a second here. I know that this is one subject that has probably been talked about more than any on the Blue Jays landscape over the last year, and it's because they kind of have an embarrassment of riches at that catching position. They have 3 studs. And I know that I have gotten personally, I wouldn't say hate, but a lot of people disagreeing with me because when I look at that trio, the guy I feel should be moved is Alejandro Kirk. Now, I have reasonings for this. I know what a stud he was. I'm well aware Silver Slugger. I'm well aware All-Star. I'm well aware that the guy offensively was, if not the best catcher in the league last year. I mean, there is an argument for it, and he's at least a top 3 in almost every category. Now, my reason for moving Kirk has a lot to do with the unbalanced lineup that we're currently looking at when you look at this roster. And when I say that, I mean The DH spot is clogged up, especially. I mean, we already talked about getting George Springer out of center field, which I think is going to help. And I know I've brought this stat up a few times, but George Springer, 33 years old, there is only a handful of guys over 6'3" and over 230 pounds who have played center field past the age of 32. Right?
Wow.
Like it is almost, for a guy that size, it is almost not done. So I think that is a priority to move him out of center field. But even if they don't, okay, look at how much time he spent at DH over the last 2 years. And obviously injuries are a roll of the dice, and he could have a completely healthy season. I'm not saying that's an impossibility, but you do need to kind of, just from the past, foresee that maybe some spots are going to be taken up at that DH role from George Springer. Let's say 40. That's still a substantial amount.
Absolutely.
And that's still less than we've seen him at DH over the last 2 years, by the way.
Wow.
So then you look at Kirk, and you got to have Kirk's bat in that lineup, right? You have to. So he's catching 2 of 5 outings a week.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to find a spot for him 3 days a week at DH. It just feels like there's no way they're moving on from Springer. You know, he was their guy.
Good point.
They've got very good candidates in Danny Jansen and Gabriel Moreno. And by the way, I think sometimes Blue Jays fans hear me talk about trading Kirk and they think that I have like a dislike of him. I freaking love Kirk. I think he's a supreme talent. But I look at the landscape out there of teams who need a catcher who is young, controllable, and affordable. And buddy, it is like 25 teams. And I just think of what we could get back for him. And I'm not saying that there isn't big value in Danny Jansen and Gabriel Moreno. There is. It just seems like for a fit, Kirk is the guy. But I'm really curious because you always have unique perspectives. And I'm wondering if you're on the same train, or if I know you even brought up the possibility of trading 2 catchers in the past. Yeah. Would love to hear your thought on this. Most excellent negative position for this front office to be in, right? Like it's a bit of a quagmire, but what a lovely little quagmire to be in.
Yeah. I talked earlier about it doesn't matter how long you've been watching the game of baseball. So many things have changed. Well, it does matter how long you've been watching the baseball. None of us have ever seen an embarrassment. Like catcher is not the position that teams have embarrassment of riches at. This is completely unprecedented. You have 3 major league studs on. Like, are you absolutely kidding me right now? This is unprecedented. To your point about Kirk, we were mere months ago, if the Cleveland Guardians were willing to play ball, that was the centerpiece of a Jose Ramirez. Is Jose Ramirez a bit of a big deal? That was the centerpiece of a Jose Ramirez superstar trade mere months ago. The only reason it didn't take place is Cleveland ended up with that re-up with Ramirez. So I'm right.
And Craig,
there
since then, Silver Slugger All-Star to his.
That's all that's happened. That's all that's happened. By the way, that's all that's happened. By the way, started in the All-Star game. Yeah, exactly correct. Exactly correct. Now so I do think that you're selling high on Kirk. Where my take is a little different on the catcher spot is I don't have one in mind. I think all 3 will fetch. For the Blue Jays, I think you have to set the standard in your boardroom and say, listen, we're coming out of this catcher trade with a number 2 starter to pair between Manoah and Tiedemann for years to come. Or we're so happy with our bullpen, it's top and big. Or we've replaced whatever your goal is, and then that's the catcher you're going to trade because it fetches you back the most. Mm-hmm. You know, like you said with me with Tua, I've long said if I'm the Blue Jays, I'm letting it known that all 3 catchers are available. Like if I've got a team on line 1 right now that wants to talk trade for Slim Daddy Vladdy, I'm not even taking that call. So I'm letting it be known, hey, we're absolutely we're open for shop. We're talking business on any of my 3 catchers. And I need to be crystal clear on this because I'm not talking about giving any of them away. I'm talking about.
Yes, and thank you.
Right? Right? Yes.
Very important, everybody.
Yes. Very, yes. That's what people keep when they hear my 2 catcher trade, their immediate reaction, Craig, if I look at Twitter and I see we've traded 2 catchers, I'm going to be absolutely heartbroken. And I say to them in that split second, I get it, but take a breath and keep going through your feed because your eyes are going to bug out at the return haul. You're going to be thrilled. You're going to be thrilled. There's a big deal trades coming. So I wouldn't mind trading 2 of them, bringing in a Christian Vasquez as my veteran to pair with whoever, or Contreras to pair with whoever the lone remaining catcher is.
Because Craig, you're with me, right? Experience matters. It's important.
One of the you blew my mind on that George Springer stat, the center fielder stat on the long toss yesterday. You blew my mind with the 10 years of experience. What champions don't have an experienced catcher back there? Like that was all. That was all really big time stuff as far as I was concerned. So yeah, so I do agree that the experience matters. I personally, I'm going to be thrilled either way. If it's one or two catchers that still remain, I'm going to be thrilled. I'm looking forward to the catcher trade because I know it's going to bring back something impressive. And I just think the market is just if you're a team that's ready to win now, is St. Louis somebody like that? You need, I mean, my God, Danny Jansen. If you're a team that fancies yourself as maybe not next year, but going forward, you've got a real nice young core like what Pittsburgh's got going there, but we don't have a catcher we're happy with. Man, Gabriel Moreno, wow, send us the king's ransom for Gabriel Moreno.
Right.
If you want somebody who is just a pure hitter, the Blue Jays took Alejandro Kirk and put him in their 4 spot for crying out loud. Like if you just want an absolute hitter, Alejandro's your guy. So it's just, there's something for everybody. You say 25, man, every single team in baseball should be involved in these trades. So I'm just really excited. Bottom line, I'm really excited about the Blue Jay catcher trade. And I personally don't have one in mind that I hope it's going to be one or the other. If anything, I hope it's not Jansen because you'll go nuts if it's Jansen.
I will go nuts if it's Jansen, but I also am prepared, right? Like I'm well aware that whoever they trade, there's going to be good reasoning behind it. And I think the haul back will make me happy. I do love Danny Jansen. He's probably my number 1 out of the 3, but I am not by any means the guy who's going to be like, how dare they, right? Like, and it's kind of interesting. You even look at this trade landscape for catchers. I mean, other than Sean Murphy with the A's, who is also an excellent catcher, there's not a heck of a lot out there for young, controllable dudes.
Yeah, and which is such a good point, and that's so cool for the Blue Jays because now if anybody is not willing to come or looking at Oakland's asking price for Murphy, how many of those teams are going to say, "Wow, geez, that's expensive"? If we're willing to pay that, if we're going to pay that, get the Blue Jays on line 1. Then. If we're going to pay that, if we're willing to pay that, get the Jays on line 1.
Okay, to start with, thank you. We talked this catcher trio problem or lack thereof problem a lot, and I always appreciate a little bit different perspective, and I think that just whatever happens, but I do like that you really emphasize the fact, guys, let's not freak out about this speculation because there will be a haul coming back, and we will be happy despite feeling that sadness and loss like we did with Teoscar. And I think that's why there's so much negative feelings around the Teoscar trade is like, he was a lovable dude, right? And he had tenure, right? He'd been here for a while. So we all had a chance to fall in love with him, right?
Absolutely. And the last thing I'll say on the catcher because I see a lot of Blue Jay fans concerned with, well, if you trade Jansen, we want Moreno and Kirk calling these games going for. I don't believe for a millisecond that John Schneider lets any of these catchers call anything. I think it's all coming from Shapiro and Atkins down to Walker and Schneider, and then seminated. Is that the way to put it? Seminated or told to the catcher. Yes. Like I don't think the Blue Jays are worried about who's going to be calling these games at all. I think management's looking in the mirror and saying, right here, who's going to be calling the games.
That's interesting. That's an interesting take. I like that. We really appreciate all of you within the walk-off community. This thing continues to grow and become an animal of its own. It's a little bit overwhelming, but honestly, we love talking Blue Jays baseball and all the interaction that you folks are involved with us. Thank you so much. Discord, feel free to join it. That is always free. The show or the link is in the show notes. You can follow us on Twitter at Walk Off Podcast, on Instagram, the Walk Off Podcast. And if you are watching on YouTube currently and you're not subscribed, we'd really appreciate if you hit that subscribe button. All the best, everybody. Cheers.